a little bit of a weekend discussion here. I'm going to have a little bit of a talk. Every once in a while I'm going to have plans to come up with a topic or an idea where we discuss current Redskin news and information. And the one thing about this organization that is prevalent for the last 20 years, and it's definitely, I think, become an issue that I've noticed just in the time that I've had my channel, that you don't really run out of topics to talk about. I mean, really, if you wanted to be a dedicated vid maker, one of the hard things you have to deal with, regardless of the team that you follow, is trying to find content in the off-season. Some people take the off-season off, and that I completely understand. I've been fairly fortunate so far, but most of us, we hit it really hard during the season, and in the off-season, we tend to take a little bit of a break. But if you're the type of person that wants to hit it hard during the regular season, the Washington Redskins organization is not a bad organization to follow if you are a fan of the team, because you're never shy of topics. You're never shy of things to talk about, controversial situations to bring to bear to your channel to discuss and to hash out. The one thing that becomes fairly evident, though, if you spend enough time doing this, and I would not consider myself having spent a whole hell of a lot of time doing this. I haven't even hit the 5-year marker yet. But even now, you start to notice tendencies. You start to notice patterns. You start to notice certain things that kind of happen about the same time every year. Now, one of the cool things about being a vid maker, especially when nobody is sponsoring you, especially when you have no financial obligations to be putting out a certain amount of content within a certain period of time to hit a certain demographic of people, or any of those, the pressures therein. I don't suffer from those things. I probably never will, because I want what it is that I say to come from me. I don't want what it is that I say to come from a sponsor, to come from a financial interest. The hell with that. And I definitely don't have anybody paying me checks or paying me money, or I don't have any corporate conglomerates that are sanctioning my words or my moves or what it is that I say. And that's a good thing, because you get to say whatever the hell you want. It's really kind of nice. Which means I don't feel the pressure of my job being on the line or having to produce. I don't feel the pressure of having to produce hardly anything, to tell you the truth. I don't have a program director that's breathing down my neck. I don't have, a boss who's, sitting there with a finger on the button or talking to me after every show saying, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that. A lot of these writers that we have that come out with stuff in the off season do answer to somebody. They are constantly trying to find ways to write about things in order to make their articles and their pieces seem more interesting, to draw more viewers and more clicks, because that's ultimately what they are supposed to do. But there's also things that they can't talk about. They can't talk about them because they worry about the source that they're referring to, or they're worrying about how it may particularly damage their reputation, thus kind of getting them, in a position where they may lose their job. You don't have to worry about that as a vid maker. It's kind of nice. And one of the things that I notice about being, about these people that are in media is a lot of them glad handle each other. They pass that buck around. They understand the pressures of having to deliver, and having to deliver within a timely fashion, but having to deliver a certain type of content, a certain type of narrative. So they understand each other's language. So radio shows, videos, sponsored video shows, and beat writers, they all tend to speak the same language. They all tend to pat each other on the back, and regardless of how truthful or asinine their comments may be, they help each other out. And I get that. I understand that. And I understand that as a beat writer in the off season, you have to do something and you have to write something pretty much every season to make yourself relevant. Now, I don't want to sit here and try and focus on one particular individual, because there's a lot of these guys that do it. And whenever I see it, it drives me crazy. It drives me up the wall, because this is an easy team to pick on. It's not that hard. The only thing that's really kind of hard about it is trying to select a different type of narrative. There's so many different bullet points you can hit on. A lot of these guys do hit those bullet points. But I don't think a lot of them understand or realize the effect that that has on a fan base. I don't even think they even really care, to tell you the truth. The Golden Award winner, or the recipient of BFG's, what do you call it? Ladle? That stirs the pot. The person that wins that award is Mike Jones. Mike Jones came out with an article. When you come out with an article like this, and Mike Jones is good for this every year. He comes out with something like this that just gets the, that ladle is stirring. And, of course, with that comes a lot of attention towards his article. It comes with, I'm pretty sure, a little bit of angst from the organization. But he measures that, I'm sure, before he hits the send button on these articles. It gives him a pretty good press tour, because that's the point, too. We got to go around and talk about it. Talk about, where some of these sources are coming from and why, and all of us are interested in some of the same questions that get asked every single week. And it turns into a little bit of a fiasco, a little bit of a show. This latest article is one that has hit pretty much every single media outlet that I have come across. Has been this article that's titled "The Redskins Offseason Better Improve or Everything Could Unravel Next Year." Catchy title. I like it. Very impressive. And before even reading this article, I listened to all the press junkets about it, and to tell you the truth, there's a lot of different points that this article hits on, and I think all of these shows have hit on every single one of the points that he was trying to convey. I'm going to give you BFG's rendition of this article, because I think this article is worth talking about, and I think that you could honestly spend the off-season and really, really pick apart this article. And I'm going to try not to do that so I can get this thing done in a timely fashion. But for those of you that have not read the article, I suggest you go into the Washington Post and take a look at it, because Mike Jones really, really hammers home on the notion that there is civil unrest within the Washington Redskin organization. Now, how hard is that? How hard of a ticket is that to sell in D.C.? That's a pretty easy ticket to sell. And it just goes to show the fears, the boogeyman type fears that these fans have towards their organization. That it's a narrative that gets played on, and it's something that that he hits home rather well. He does this he seems to do this every off season too. He's done this quite a bit every year, and there's a couple of them that are worse than he is, but he kind of drives me nuts a little bit when he does this, because he's very, very good at pointing to the elephant in the room. And no matter how much the organization tries to convince you that there is no elephant in the room, he tries to convince you that there is one. And it's really, really big, and it's really, really huge, and we don't understand why you don't miss it. As a fan, you got to kind of land somewhere in the middle. Okay, there is an elephant in the room, but I don't think it's as big as a lot of people think it is. Or maybe the situation's not quite what you think it is. Anyway, he goes on to talk about this particular article and talking about after 2 successful seasons, how we should be rejoicing in the success of these 2 seasons. Granted, last season we did not make the playoffs, but last season was not a bust. Last season I would consider to be an above-average performance, which is not what fans were expecting. Fans were expecting to go back to the playoffs. That's the fans' problem. That's the fans' fault. There were a lot of us that predicted that we were going to regress just a little bit, but we were still going to remain strong. I remember I said that in a video last year, that I predicted this year to not be as good as last year. But we might make the playoffs and we might not, but we're not going to see a complete and total regression. And we didn't, even though we had one of the worst defenses in the league. Our offense was very, very good. And we were just shy, 1 game shy of pretty much, riding our own ticket into the playoffs. And that didn't necessarily happen for us, and that's okay. We regressed a little bit, but it wasn't a complete bust. Now, the way he fashions his article, he makes it sound as though, yes, last season was a fairly successful season, but there were a lot of things that we've got to look down upon about last season, and those are things I don't necessarily agree with. Now, he does a really good job of trying to sell us the idea that something is amiss. You know, the boogeyman in the closet, the James Bond type specter that exists in Redskins Park. You know, the evil machinations of you know, authority. You know, the kind of the authority behind the curtain, or the lack thereof. And it's interesting because one of the things he talks about is, despite this season, we've got this, you know, the Redskins, you know, brain trust that is scrambling behind the scenes. That there's a lot of finger pointing. That there's a lot of there's just a whole lot of dysfunction. He gives off the era, the era of dysfunction. And granted, with all this dysfunction going on, we've got some deadlines coming up here that are very, very important. Taking a look at these deadlines, to name some of them in this article, and he's absolutely correct. 20 days away, we've got an NFL scouting combine that we should be preparing for. We should be completely and absolutely focused on these deadlines. Instead, we've got a lot of other crap that's going on that's useless and worthless, and it's not going to get us anywhere. We're going to see a lot of this same crap going on every single year if we don't focus on what it is we need to be doing. I just want to understand, we're a multi-million-dollar organization, and we can't do the simplest of things. This is stupid to me. 20 days away, we've got an NFL scouting combine that's coming up. We've got a deadline for a franchise tag on Kirk Cousins. And we are no closer to a deal with him, by the way. But we've got that deadline for the franchise tag coming up if we're looking at the scouting combine. Then, of course, 6 days away from that free agency, you know, which we basically have not really shown a whole hell of a lot of initiative on. And that's very disconcerting because we've got some we've got some problems, you know, at free agency that need to be addressed. And I don't understand what better time than now. Now, part of the goals that we have to have in this off season, and they're very simple, but they're also extremely complex. And I've mentioned this in previous videos. I even mentioned this in the conference situation that we had on Louis T's channel. But the things that we need to hit home on, that he mentions in his article, we need to hit big on draft evaluations, we need to hit big on free agency, and we need to hit big on the draft itself. So the draft, evaluating for the draft, those are two completely different things, which are things we should be focusing on absolutely right now, and we should have been focusing on since the end of last season, getting those boards ready and prepared, getting those evaluation scouts coming in and discussing tape, discussing positions, discussing players from all over the country, and pouring over that stuff with a fine-tooth comb and getting your board ready. That's really what needs to be happening, making phone calls, talking to agents, you know, getting feelers out there, reaching out. You know, these are all things that I presume happen behind the war room doors. And then, of course, there's the draft itself, the actual draft day, the couple days leading up to it, and then, of course, the days after and during. Those are things that really need to be focused on. And then, of course, the free agency situation, which is going to have to play a big role this year. Probably one of the biggest off seasons that we have had in a long, long time needs to take place in 2017. And one of the things that I would have added on to that, and rather than just those three, would have been player development. And I've been saying that. I said that in my last video. Player development needs to be a major focus. And I'm sorry, but we are regressing in the player development phase. We took a major step back. We took a major step back this offseason in the player development area in just the coaching, you know, situation that we have going on here in Washington. I'm expecting a little bit more regression this year just with the cluster F that has been this offseason's, I don't know what you call it. It's got just this nasty film of Three Stooges attached to it. You know, it's just this laughter of complete clumsy, retarded, I don't know what it is, organized chaos that seems to be our evaluation ability at bringing in talent, and the ability to bring in talent to have them want to coach here. And those are going to be the individuals that develop your talent. And I'm sorry, but it's not going to be there this year, in my opinion, at least other than the defensive line. I don't fault Scott McLuhan for his draft picks at this point. As a general manager, you're going to hit and you're going to miss on draft picks. You're not going to hit on every single one. Now, would we have expected for the money that we were paying him to get a little bit more out of him as far as talent evaluation, as far as player development goes? Probably. But regardless of his results right now, I think I still would go with Scott McGlue, and I still would believe in his process. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this article is Mike Jones gives off the impression that things are beginning to unravel at Redskins Park. It's one of the things he tries to hammer home a little bit in this article. Now, it's obvious that we, of course, let go of Joe Barry. We let go of pretty much the whole entire defensive side of the football. Now, the Joe Barry situation, the sacrificial lamb that was Joe Barry, that situation ended up being what a lot of fans knew what it was going to be. We saw that situation coming, and that's a situation that I don't think is worth necessarily commenting about or scrutinizing to any particular depth, because why? Yeah, I mean, he's gone. And to tell you the truth, I think it was a good thing having him go. However, having him go not only was a good thing, but it was also a bad thing too. And you have to really kind of take a look at it from a certain perspective to understand that it was also a bad thing, because we're going to start seeing it here in the next couple of months. Now, one of the things that interests me, one of the things I found fascinating about this article is not necessarily the way that Mike Jones portrays it, but the way that Mike Jones describes it is a process that has been going on for a long time now, where we let go of a coordinator and we have this assumption, we have this opinion that we're just going to replace this individual, we're just going to replace this coach with X, or X. So just, a small little laundry list of people that don't worry about it, we're going to get them in here, so it's going to be an easy fix. And that's kind of one of the things he talks about, is that we had this impression that after letting him go, that we were going to have our lot to pick from a certain number of defensive coordinators that were going to be chomping at the bit to come here to coach. I don't understand what it is about our recent history that makes this so difficult to figure out. This isn't hard. This isn't rocket scientist. And let me really kind of paint this picture with a really fat brush. We have arthritic hands. We have small hands. We can't grip the fine precision brush that professionals use. We need to get second grade here. And let me make this really simple so that the people in the organization can understand. Nobody wants to come here to coach. Nobody wants to come here to coach. So if you're in the organization and you sit above the head coach as far as your job description is concerned, and you sit just beneath the owner, then you need to understand that nobody wants to come here to coach. So stop assuming that people do. If the Ryans don't want to come here, granted, I don't have a very high opinion of the Ryan brothers at all. I don't want them here. But if they don't want to come here, that really needs to be an indication as to where you stand in the league as far as respect among coaches go. The ones that you were able to get here, the ones that have Super Bowl pedigrees, or the ones that have any iota of a name for themselves in the National Football League, come in here with teams of lawyers and ironclad contracts because they don't trust our owner and his legal team. They don't trust their GM and his legal team. They don't trust a lot of people in this organization and their legal team. They want to come here to get their experience so that they can go somewhere else. The firing of Joe Barry was something that had to happen, but the rift that ended up causing was the peeling back of this fantasy layer that we've made for ourselves the last 5 years, thinking that people want to come here. We've done enough to completely change our situation, and people are going to want to come here. In other words, we've had our heads in the sand about this situation. Nobody wants to come here. A lot of us saw this situation happening. You come up with this laundry list of people, and it's like, okay, we're bringing them in here, and that's great. That's great to bring them in here for an interview, but you should be thinking to yourself, what are the odds of us landing one of these guys? It's not that good because we don't have the greatest of reputations of landing them. First of all, Joe Barry wasn't our first selection. He wasn't even close to our first selection when we hired him. A lot of people were pissed off when we did hire him because what did he do in Detroit? Well, you let one of those guys go. I'm sorry, you're not going to climb, you're not going to ascend that ladder. I'm sorry, you're not going to ascend that ladder, of coaching talent when you're letting guys like Joe Barry go. And that's the part that's really frustrating to see. Now, Tom Sula, Jim Tom Sula, and hiring him as our defensive line coach, that was probably the one coach we've made so far, the coaching decision we've made so far, that I'm actually somewhat impressed with, that I'm kind of glad to see something like that happening. But one of the things he talks about in his article is, but what is he walking into? Chris Baker, who's a free agent this year. I mean, Chris Baker is the only, and I heard it before, Chris Baker is somebody that the Redskins hold in high regard, and we really, really shouldn't. First of all, Chris Baker was a project from the start, and he actually ended up being a fairly successful project for us. But Chris Baker is not an elite player. Chris Baker is probably about as average gets in this league, and Chris Baker wants to be paid. And I understand that. And to tell you the truth, if it's fairly reasonable, I would probably pay him. Just paying him for his work ethic, his leadership ability, what he's been able to bring to the table for this organization, that's something that I think I would do. He's been a homegrown talent. He's definitely not a league line buster. But I'll tell you one thing, I think he would be worth the contract. I mean, I really do. I really think that we'd see progression out of him after we signed him, but only under one condition. And this condition is actually pretty far-fetched. It shouldn't be. It really should, and it should be very difficult to talk about. This should be very difficult to say, but it's not. It's easy to say because we do it. And what it is that I'm going to say is in order for him to be successful, in order for him to ascend that next level as a defensive lineman, is you have to put somebody next to him. You have to put somebody next to him. You have to have somebody to complement Chris Baker. If Chris Baker is the only person on the defensive line that is impressive to another team, what chances are you going to have to actually progress? You're going to double team that guy. Not that you have to, but you're more often than not, you're going to double team that guy. Ricky Jean-Francois is not one of those guys. Okay, I'm talking about a stud, a high caliber, somebody that you get out of free agency or the draft, preferably the draft. And you've had several years to do both, and it hasn't been done. The individuals that we've put in there, like he has mentioned in his article, we ended up getting what the Kendall Reyeses of the world, the Stephen Pios of the world. These guys are not league world breakers, man. These guys are not going to be crunching up pockets like they're sandwiches. Okay, we're talking about individuals that were top of the trash heap individuals to come in to fill into that spot to see how they do. Just kind of throwing, paste up against the wall to see if it sticks. That's not the type of compliment to Chris Baker that I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who has a hell of a lot more talent than Chris Baker and sticking him next to him, sticking that stud next to him. Now, I do like the idea of sticking a Trent Murphy on the defensive line, putting his hand in the dirt, putting him at that outside defensive line position, defensive end, and having him compliment him, but he can't do it by himself either. I could see us getting a stud out of the draft in the first 2 rounds, getting us that really, really big, talented, even nose tackle at that point. Stick a young talent at nose, sticking Baker in a 3-tech, and then sticking on the other side, putting up Trent Murphy. That would be my game plan. And really, the only thing you really, really have to do is just plan on getting yourself a defensive lineman, maybe even 2 defensive linemen, somebody as a backup, somebody to rotate in and out. But Chris Baker's not the answer to our defensive line. He never was. And we're treating it, and right now at this point, it's not even looking like we're wanting to bring him back. There's rumors about us not wanting to bring him back because of the money that he's asking for, and we may not necessarily want to pay him. If we don't want to pay these people what they're worth, then we deserve to get the mediocre talent that's coming our way, and that does not bode well at all for Washington Redskins fans. Now, one of the other interesting things about this article that was brought up was the defensive coaching situation. With the defensive coaching situation, we had Perry Fuel. Perry Fuel, who was originally let go along with the Joe Barry firing, was an individual that was touted as being an extremely hard-nosed and ineffective communicator. Somebody that was hard to garner the respect from a lot of the players on his team. So I don't necessarily think that there were too many tears that were shed when he ended up leaving. Now, ultimately, within house, one of the things that was rumored in this article was that we wanted to bring Aubrey Pleasant and bring him up through the ranks and stick him into a much more prominent coaching role. It was said in this article, and I've heard this before throughout the season, that he was a rising talent. Of course, he worked under Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris was a fairly decent coach for us, not necessarily world-breaking. Wasn't all that big of a deal. We ended up letting him go, but he was a fairly decent defensive back coach. But it was said that Aubrey Pleasant was a guy that communicated very, very well with his defensive backs and was also one of the only coaches to really be able to communicate with Bashaud Breeland. If you think about it, Bashaud Breeland, kind of his prolific year that he had was under that coaching regime with Raheem Morris and Aubrey Pleasant. Now, one of the things that doesn't necessarily make any sense about, this whole Aubrey Pleasant situation is that we had denied Aubrey Pleasant the ability to interview with other teams. When other teams wanted to interview him to see him as a possible coaching addition to their team, we wouldn't allow that to happen. Now, usually when a team does that, is they do that because they kind of want to keep their players in-house. They don't want them interviewing with other teams because they really have no intentions of letting them go. I don't know necessarily what our idea was behind this, but all I know is it sounded to me like somebody who worked well within the organization is somebody that we kind of want to keep within the organization, so we're not going to allow him to interview anywhere else. But in doing that, we also didn't exactly come up with wanting to pay him as though we wanted to keep him. We were speaking the language all the way up until it came down to paying money. And I'm sorry, but both players and coaches on this level, the only way that you are going to show any measure of confidence in ability, confidence in work ethic, confidence in track record is financial. It's financial restitution. If you want to show me that you want to be here, then pay me. That's the one thing that we don't want to do. We want these people to come to our organization. We don't want to pay them, and that's the thing that it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand it. They talk about how we wouldn't necessarily let him talk to other teams, that we barred him from being able to do that. However, we didn't come to the table with wanting to pay him. There was the two sides were in constant disagreement over what the pay should be. So we thought he was making too much money. We don't want to pay him more. And we definitely didn't want him to ascend up that ladder. And he definitely didn't want to do it, without being... He wanted to do it, but wanted to be compensated for it. Which I can completely understand. But no, we decided not to. And you sit at a negotiation table, and you can't come to a deal. So before you're even done talking, before you're even done negotiating this situation with him, you end up taking interviews for his job. The job that you're interviewing him for, you end up doing interviews with other coaches. That does not spell confidence at all in the person that you're trying to negotiate from within. You're not sending a very good message. And I guess I can understand from a certain perspective how you kind of want to, give him the impression that, we're not completely reliant upon him. But it also may backfire on you in the idea that by by taking interviews with other, from other coaches, that you're not exactly instilling a whole lot of confidence in him coming here or wanting to be here to coach anyway, especially if you don't want to pay him. Well, if you don't want to pay me and you're interviewing outside of the organization, well, then it looks like I need to start packing my bags because you don't want me here very much. So then, of course, you don't want to necessarily have him take interviews. You don't want to you're interviewing other people for his position. You can't come to an agreement as far as compensation goes. And you definitely don't want to hire an assistant to help him out. So he ends up walking. And where does he go? He ends up walking right through the first door that comes his way, right back to the individual that makes sense to him to coach under, and that's in L.A. So he's with the L.A. Rams now and Sean McVay. Now, instead, who you end up bringing back into this situation, who you end up hiring instead, after you've let Pleasant go, you end up bringing in this Torian Gray guy, this coach, this defensive coach out of Virginia Tech. Now, one of the unfortunate aspects that I have as a fan is that I don't come from the DMV area, so I have the ability to make comments about people from the DMV area because I really have no vested interest in them. So I think to a certain extent I come with a certain measure of bias. So we end up taking Coach Torian Gray, and by this article's insistence, one of the things they end up mentioning is that this was at the request of Kendall Fuller and Keyshawn Jarrett, two former Virginia Tech players. Huh? So we have a guy within the organization who shows a certain measure of talent, who is coaching on your team at one of our more successful avenues of having defensive backs, because we regressed last year. And rather than promoting from within and taking the guy that your players respond to well, especially the one player that we selected in the draft that should be playing really, really well but isn't, but the one guy on the team that he responds to the most, and that's the guy you decide to let walk. You don't want to pay him. You're interviewing for people in his position, and you can't come to negotiating price with him because you're stingy with your money and you think he's making too much, and you let him walk. You end up letting him go to LA, and your solution to that is to go to your team and take requests. Is there a box for this? Is there a form that you get to fill out that you put into a box that the GM comes down or the president comes down later on to read all your little slips to do is like a anonymous democracy that's going on here at Redskins Park? Are we taking requests now from defensive backs? So guys, who do you want to have coach you? Let's get Torian Gray to come out of Virginia Tech to come do this. We're talking about two individuals, Kendall Fuller and Keyshawn Jarrett. Two individual guys, I'm sorry, you don't need to be making coaching suggestions. You guys need to be working on your craft. Because right now you guys are working yourselves out of a job. I haven't seen anything out of either one of those individuals to really indicate to me that these guys are going to be worthwhile to this football team in the next 10 years. Absolutely not. I'm going to be surprised if they provide anything that's going to be worth of any value in the next 10 games. Okay, Keyshawn Jarrett really needs to work on his situation, and don't even get me started on Kendall Fuller. Okay, Kendall Fuller, buddy, slot receiver, man. That needs to be your life. That you need to eat, breathe, and crap that stuff. You need to tell family, go away for the next 10 years, because I got a lot of stuff that I got to concentrate on, because Kendall Fuller, buddy, so far you ain't got it. You do not have it. You're moving yourself out of a position. I'm sorry, but that was a position that we drafted you for. That was a position we wanted you to play, is that slot position. I'm sorry, but moving back to safety, I'm tired of us drafting these corners then moving them to safety, the rumor of us moving them to safety. In other words, you really, really made a bust of a pick. If you want your safety within the first 5 years of being on your team, or your corner to be in the first 5 years of your team to move them back to safety. That doesn't need to happen. I want corners, man. I want corners that can do their job. And right now, I really, really want Kendall Fuller to do his job. Right now, I really, really want Keyshawn Jarrett to do his job. I don't need them for coach evaluations. So their opinions on coaches and their evaluations on coaches are absolutely, completely irrelevant to me. It's probably not any more or less important than me making the suggestion to Redskins Park as to who is going to be our defensive backs coach. So the big rumor right now is what type of coach is Torian Gray going to be? Of course, the request, one of the things that's coming up on Torian Gray is that he really is no different than Perry Fuel, an individual who is not flexible, somebody who is very job-oriented, somebody who's going to be very, very structured, and already has some of the veterans on the team that are a little bit worried about his coaching style. So that makes sense. Have the one guy that's getting along with your team, oust him out the door, but the one guy who's going to fight with your players the most and be extremely difficult to relate to, sure, let's bring that guy in. Let's just have a little bit more of Perry Fuel, please, because we were so successful with that before. Now, of course, along with the coaching situation, we've got a couple other situations that are coming up here, too. We've got the D'Angelo Hall situation coming up. What do we do with D'Angelo Hall? Is this a guy that we have come back and play safety for us? To me, if you're, and I love D'Angelo Hall, but honestly, I could do without D'Angelo Hall. With as important as he is to this football team, I don't think he serves much more of a purpose than what he's already served. I think his years are behind him, and right now his services would be much, much more welcome on this football team if we were on the verge of having a top stellar defense. We have too many needs on defense right now to sit here and have to rely on a D'Angelo Hall. I'd rather have him in rotation behind some very, very good talent as a leadership component. But I need way, way more out of that position, out of that spot in that roster. I need way more than what he's able to give. So a lot of you guys I know consider him to be an extremely good safety. Unfortunately, the things that he's good at is not good enough to be a safety on this football team. He needs to have a whole lot more in his repertoire that he just does not have anymore. And there's two reasons why he doesn't have it. One is the injuries that he has sustained within the last 2 to 3 years is keeping him from having it. And two, he's too old. He's too old. Those two reasons alone should be the reason why he should not be back on this football team. I want somebody in his spot that is young, that is scrappy, that is fast, that is quick, that is intelligent, and wants to play football. I want Scott McGloon's football player. That's what I want. I want a Scott McGloon football player, and I want a top-notch safety in that position. In fact, I would like two of them. To tell you the truth, I'd like a couple of them. I'd like Keyshawn Jarrett to pull his head out of his ass and be able to play that position well. And if we're talking about moving Rashad Breeland there, then we better be hitting home in the draft on corners. Okay, Bashaud Breeland better be able to do the job. Whatever job it is that we give him, he better be able to do it. Because right now, the kid's pissing me off. He needs to do a hell of a lot more than just bitch about who's coming in and being their number one corner on the football team. You need to be worried about your position on the football team. Not who's number one, not who's number two, not who's number three. I'm worried about your number. The one that sits in the back and the front of your jersey, and you being able to do your job, Bashaud Breeland. Because to tell you the truth, to be drafted at the selection that you were out of Clemson to come to this football team and play professional football at corner, and now we're talking about bumping you to safety, that's not good. That is not good at all, in my opinion. Okay, if we're already trying to find other things for you to do as opposed to what we drafted you for, then you're not doing your job. Moving on, Sua Cravens. Is Sua Cravens going to be able to move back and play safety? There's a lot of people out there that are really, really high on Sua Cravens. And I've watched a lot of Sua Cravens. I watched him play in college, and I watched him play in Washington. And to tell you the truth, Sua Cravens, I feel, is a good football player. I feel like he's an impactful football player. I think he's a playmaker, to tell you the truth. However, I think with a little more size, he would probably be a better outside linebacker or a better inside linebacker than he would be as safety. He's got more of a nose for that shallow stuff. As far as playing safety, though, what a lot of people don't understand is that safety's not what it used to be back in the day. You've got to be able to do a lot of different things as a safety. There really is no such thing as a free safety, strong safety anymore. Those two jobs used to be very, very different. In the NFL, in today's NFL, those are two of the same thing. As a safety, to be successful in the National Football League, you've got to be able to play both strong and free. You cannot afford to only be good at one thing in this league, because if quarterbacks know that you're just a strong safety, then they know how to come after you. They know how to exploit you as a weakness. If they know that all you are is a free safety, they know how to exploit that too. If they don't quite know what job role you're playing on this particular play, if you're playing high or if you're playing shallow, that mystery is all the difference in the world in a defensive scheme. And you need to be able to play both. And you can't rotate people in and out. Quarterbacks are too smart and they're too good in this league, man. You need to be able to play both. So Sua Cravens has got to be able to do both as a safety player. And I haven't seen him be able to play both. He's never been in a position yet to be able to play both. I will say that. The things that concern me is I want to know if he's going to be able to do a lot of these intangibles, the things that you expect a safety to do. You know, is he going to be able to cover a big tight end in this league? That's a big question mark. Who knows? Can he cover a Gronkowski? You know, can he cover a Jordan Reed type player on the other football team? That's a big question. He's got to be able to do that as a safety, because we've been searching for a safety to do that for a long time now. Is he going to be able to cover the outside hash mark when he needs to get there? That's the biggest thing that I look for in a safety, is can he cover that outside out and get to that outside hash mark? That outside, between that zone between the hash mark and the sideline. A lot of safeties can't get there, but if you got to play the position, you got to be able to get there when you're supposed to get there. Can you play that middle half? Can you play that middle corner? Can you play the shallow? Can you play the shallow zone underneath route? These are all things that you got to be able to do as a safety when you're going up against. He's going to be going up against all kinds of people: tight ends, slot receivers, and then deep corner post runners on the outside. He's got to be able to cover all those guys, and I don't know if he's got that ability. I really, really don't. That's not exactly what we drafted him for. And we're asking him to do something. We're asking him to play a more permanent position as a safety. The jury's out for me on him. I'm going to be evaluating him quite a bit. This season and seeing if I think he's got the ability to play safety. If not, I personally would be concentrating a little bit more on Sua Cravens being more of a linebacker or that linebacker-safety hybrid, but now moving him back to safety, I just know the safety position a little too well to know if he's going to be able to do it or not. So I would expect his transition to that position to take a little bit longer than having a dedicated safety being drafted into that position. Now, one of the things that this article ended up bringing up as well is that was just the defensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball really isn't all that great either. The offensive side of the ball is in flux right now, and it should be one of the most stable situations on this football team, but it's not. One of the things that he brings up is the loss of Sean McVay. Now, this is the part that surprises me, is people that come out and say that they were absolutely shocked about the Sean McVay hiring and they didn't see that coming. The Redskins media has been talking about Sean McVay getting hired as a head coach for a couple of years now. ever since Robert Griffin III got drafted, and ever since we found out that he was learning under Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan and how they held him in very high regard, that was when a lot of these guys started sniffing out the fact, hey, if this guy is being held in high regard, and if he is pretty much the one that is working with the quarterbacks and making the play calls under a Kyle Shanahan, then you have to know that the potential in the sky, the limit on this guy is pretty high. The potential is there. And man, you have got to see that coming. You've got to see that and try to invest in that, which is kind of what we did. But as soon as Kyle Shanahan left, it makes all the sense in the world to me that if you think you're going to lose him into a head coaching position in the next couple of years, I'm sticking as many assistants as I possibly can underneath him. I really, really am. And I'm going to pay them probably more than what they're worth to learn as much as they possibly can under a Sean McVay. When you have a talent like that, that is behind the clipboard on your football team, that has that ability, that has that, those are the people that you want to teach other people in your organization. You know you're going to lose him, but you want as many people as you can to learn underneath him. You don't want to sit there and play naive and think that we're the Washington Redskins and where else could he possibly want to go? Come on, man. He got his first offer and he was out of here. It's not like he was keeping the Wolves at bay. No, I'm going to stay in Washington. No, I'm going to stay in Washington. No, bam, gone. Coach in L.A.? Sure. Youngest coach in history? Hey, no problem, man. I'll take it. Let me the hell out of here. And what do? We dance around with our hands in the air going, wait a minute. We didn't see that coming. So Mike Jones is giving off this impression, and I'm pretty sure he's accurate, that we're kind of surprised that he ended up leaving. And now we've got this massive hole with no way to fill it right now. Of course, Jay Gruden's going to be... That was one of the things that really, really sucked, too, is that Jay Gruden liked having Sean McVay on the team because it allowed Jay Gruden to concentrate more on the football side, the more of the coaching, the football aspect, the team aspect on the field, without having to concentrate so much on play calling. Well, now he's going to concentrate on play calling. Does that mean we're going to start seeing a regression everywhere else? Because that can rear its ugly head. The time management situation is going to get worse. The substitution situation is going to get worse. Illegal formations, false starts, these things are all indicative of an individual who has a little bit more on his plate than what he should, and having to play call. So we could probably look forward to that. It really kind of depends on how that whole situation is going to work now that Jay Gruden's taken over. Somebody else has got to take over his job role now, too. Who's that going to be? So, Sean McVay leaving, us not necessarily knowing about that, we can't blame that on Scott McLuhan. Scott McLuhan's not in charge of that stuff. We all know who's in charge of that stuff, and I'm going to get to him later. But you have to be able, as a coach, be able to judge your personnel and judge your staff. You have to take a look at the strengths and the weaknesses of your staff. You have to be able to find out who is an above average and above talent coach. And as far as I'm concerned, you need to figure out how to cultivate that and borrow off that and leech off that as much as humanly possible. Much like what we did when the New England Patriots came to town and they played against our team in that off-season scrimmage. What did we do? We sent all kinds of people out to watch how the New England Patriots warmed up and practiced. We sent out a whole bunch of scouts to find out how it is, and you know that Tom Brady communicates with his team and how it is that he warms up. That guy couldn't wipe his ass without us having, teams of people watching it and documenting it and writing it down and coming up with all kinds. God knows what we were doing, but all I know is that we were watching him. It kind of became a laugh around the league when New England came to town. So why is it that we're doing that when New England comes to town? We have the ability to show that, but yet when we have, high caliber talent that's here, people who show promise that are here, but we can't evaluate that talent. We can't pass that along. As soon as that's out the door, it's gone forever. Now, the one thing that is going to be the most crucial aspect of this offseason, and it goes without saying, is going to be the most important domino to fall in this whole offseason, and it can happen at any time. It's a binary subject, really. It's on or off. It's yes or no. And that's the Kirk Cousins domino. How is that domino going to fall? Is it going to fall forward or is it going to fall backwards? That's the big multi-million-dollar question at this point. And so far, the things that are coming out of Redskin Park are not necessarily positive. They haven't been positive about that Kirk Cousins domino for the last couple of years. And that's the thing that's probably the most frustrating in this whole situation, is you kind of start to see the direction that this domino is being tipped. Now, both Bruce Allen and Jay Gruden have come out and said that Kirk Cousins is going to be on this football team. And even Bruce Allen said this situation is not as difficult as people think it is. But Kirk Cousins is our guy, and he's going to be in this organization. And you know what? That's fine when you're talking people up on Media Row, and that's great. You say what it is you're supposed to say, but everything that has been going on the last couple of years says otherwise. Says to the contrary to that. We haven't shown Kirk Cousins hardly any love whatsoever. I mean, the only thing we've shown Kirk Cousins, we have absolutely no faith in his ability whatsoever. And we're not willing to back that faith up with financial restitution. We're not going to be rewarding this guy by telling him that we want him here by paying him. We haven't shown him that at all. So I'm not buying this crap when either one of these individuals is saying he's our guy. In fact, Jay Gruden's the only guy that I actually believe. I don't believe Bruce Allen whatsoever. I believe Jay Gruden. Unfortunately, Jay Gruden doesn't have the power or the ability to offer Kirk Cousins, the money that's going to take to keep him here to make that Kirk Cousins domino fall in a positive direction for us. And really, there still is no sign that we're coming any closer to a deal. Money talks, man. Money talks, and we've lowballed this kid on several occasions. We've given him prove-it deals, and he's proven it, and there's still no deal. There's still no offer on the table. As far as I'm concerned, we've dropped the ball in that area. And it's disconcerting. It's really disconcerting to see an individual with the talent that Kirk Cousins has, and to be able to ship that talent out the door to another team to watch it proliferate somewhere else. That's going to be really frustrating. If he ends up going to a really, really comfortable team, or a really solid team with some weapons around him and some protection, you're going to see Kirk Cousins flourish, man. You're going to see him shine, and it's going to suck. Because it's going to be the anecdote of every single damn article that comes out, every single ridicule. It's going to be more fuel for First Take like you wouldn't believe. Every Cowboys fan and Eagles fan on earth is going to be they're going to love hammering home on that one. And that's going to be a really sore subject for a very long time to come, and it's going to be nobody's fault but our own. Now, if Kirk Cousins is able to sign the long-term deal, if this domino is able to fall in a positive direction, then honestly I feel that your future as a franchise is going to look a little brighter. I think that things are going to be looking on the up and up. I think at that point you've really got to seriously start taking a look at Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson. You have the ability to sign them both. You're probably not going to, though. If you're going to choose between one of the two, I'm saying Pierre Garçon is your guy all the way. The intangibles that he has and the abilities that he has and the things that he does for this football team, they last longer. They're there for a hell of a lot more games. They're way more reliable. And granted, he does not put on the football field. He does not put on the football field what Deshaun Jackson is able to put on the football field. But just Deshaun Jackson's inability to be there for all 16 games of the season. The fact that he's only 160 pounds and he only brings one aspect of this offense to fruition. That's just his pure speed. I think there's a lot more facets that benefit your team coming from a Pierre Garçon. He just does more. He does way more. And that's the guy that I'm willing to keep here. That's the guy I would want to keep here. And trust me, his services are very highly sought after right now. Pierre Garçon, and I couldn't be happier for him, because I thought that this would be the time of his career where not a whole lot of people are looking and he'd be pushing retirement. But not the case, man. He's 30 years old and still has a lot of suitors, and that's cool. That's really, really good to see, and that's a guy that I would like to see come here. Now, if he does end up getting signed, if Kirk does end up getting signed, then I've mentioned this before, and I won't go into too much detail, but of course you've got to sign Jay Gruden and Scott McLuhan to extended contracts. That is the triangle effect that I would want to keep here in Washington. I won't go into too much detail about that. But all you have to do at that point is just kind of worry about offensive line depth. Now, Corey Lichtensteiger ended up retiring, of course, so we're going to have to find some more depth at that position. We have to find a solid starter at that position. But you've got to figure out how your offensive line depth is going to work, and you're going to have to shore that up with a couple more people. You've got to have a healthy, robust running back core you got to have healthy competition at running back. That's something that I've always believed in and will always believe in. I would like to see Matt Jones come back and be able to be a success story after his turmoil from last season. I would like to see him flourish. That would only benefit our team. So I'd like to see healthy rotation at running back. That's another good thing that comes from the Kirk Cousins domino effect. And I also like to see, the off-season routines go back to what they were. Whether it's Kirk Cousins going out and getting coached up by other individuals out there that helped him become the quarterback, that he's become doing more of that, working with receivers and tight ends in the off-season. He knows what to do, and he's done a really, really good job of it so far, and I'd like to see him be able to continue that. And there's already signs and inklings that that's already taking place, even though he doesn't even have a long-term deal in his football team. He doesn't have to be doing any of these things. He can be doing the Tony Romo thing and just be doing golf circuits and press junkets and waving to the fans and vacations with the old lady and enjoying life, because I know in a couple of years I'm going to be getting paid. He's not doing that, man. He's devoted to a team that has shown very little devotion to him. Now, if we franchise tag him, that's not good. That is not good at all. That's bad. That's a domino falling in a negative, and it's having a negative impact. It's falling in a negative fashion. Now, if we end up signing him to a franchise tag and giving him one more franchise tag deal, then you have to worry about who's going to be the future quarterback of this football team. And there's so many facets that come to that. I don't think it's free agency this year or next year. The type of money that you're going to be looking at paying a person to get you to the playoffs is pretty much we're going to be looking at paying Kirk Cousins now. So it's not necessarily good unless you go to the draft. And I'm sorry, but if you are going to go to the draft, which to tell you the truth, I'm not completely out of the ballpark on. I think that that's a very viable avenue for us. And I'm only saying that because the individual was able to play or evaluate, both San Francisco and Seattle's quarterbacks in 2011 and 2012. We've got that guy right now. We've got that guy as our general manager. I couldn't think of any other time in history that I'd be more confident in an individual making a selection as deep as quarterback on a football franchise as Scott McLuhan and his team. That makes me sleep just a little bit better at night. If the Kirk Cousins domino falls in a negative fashion, that's the only reason why I'm saying that. So if we franchise tag him, then I'm putting a lot of faith in Scott McLuhan to be able to get us another quarterback. And we don't have to get a quarterback in the first round, guys. Don't think we have to get a quarterback in the first round, because a lot of the successful quarterbacks that we have in the league right now, especially out of 2012, were not out of the first round. So Kirk Cousins was a fourth-round draft pick. So there is talent to be had out there. It just may not necessarily be where you think it's going to come from. So there is talent to be had. I'm having a little bit of, probably more confidence than most as far as that avenue is concerned. But that's the only positive side that I see from us franchise tagging Kirk Cousins. The rest of it, on the other hand, is not good. Another thing that falls negative on that domino falling in a negative fashion is going to be our head coach. I don't think he will last beyond his coaching deal. If Kirk Cousins is not re-signed, your running back situation's in turmoil. Your head offensive coordinator just jumped ship to go become a head coach in L.A., and your quarterback isn't going to be back next year. So your final year of your contract, you're going to be swimming in a new quarterback, and we both know what the odds of that being successful is going to be like. There's going to be massive regression there. And under those circumstances, you expect Jay Gruden to sign an extension or us to offer an extension? That's not going to happen. And we're right back to the coaching carousel that we've been doing for the last 20 years. And that is the razor's edge that I refer to in the beginning of this segment, is that the Kirk Cousins domino is a very, very, very important domino. It's a very important domino. And it's one that I'm leapfrogging back and forth on. I can see the wisdom in not keeping Kirk, but I can see the downward spiral in not keeping Kirk. And, I'm starting to side more on the fact that, paying him that astronomical amount is not so much about getting to the Super Bowl anymore as it's about keeping the continuity of the team that you've been growing for the last couple of years. That's what is making sense to me now. I would hate to pay a quarterback that much money, but if it's going to keep the band together, then I can understand the argument for keeping him. I really, really can. And I am not going to be sad if we do keep Kirk Cousins. When I've been pretty much touting all week, all off season and all regular season, that keeping him may not necessarily be in the best interest of the team. At this point, in order to keep the band together, in order to keep the team together, in order to keep Scott McLuhan here, and in order to be able to keep that talent coming through that door, the Kirk Cousins domino is a very, very, very important domino. Now, one of the other important things about this article that was brought up was the one topic that was probably hit home the most. And that was the idea that Bruce Allen now has come down on Scott McLuhan during the offseason and has pretty much backed him into a corner. I don't know exactly how poignant a lot of this stuff is, but it probably is way worse than what people think it is. But has pretty much turned the screws on Scott McLuhan and telling him, you are no longer going to be doing press interviews. You are no longer be going to doing interviews during the scouting combine. You're not going to be doing anything during the Senior Bowl. And you're going to be concentrating on player evaluation. You're going to be doing your job. So far, you haven't been able to do the job that we've hired you to come in here and do. So we want you to concentrate more fully on what it is that we expect you to do for this football team. Now, this is asinine to me. This is asinine to me. I'm a Scott McLuhan guy. I really, really am. And one of the only things that has been able to give me a certain measure of hope since the Robert Griffin, the third ship got blown out of the water and I got to watch my beloved vessel sink. I got to see my Yamato-class battleship sink to the bottom of the damn ocean. All of that money, all of those lives, all of that pride fall to the bottom of the ocean in failure. The only thing that gave me a certain measure of hope is the fact that we hired a Scott McLuhan in charge of our general managership, in charge of our player evaluation, in charge of our player scouting, player personnel. That gave me all kinds of hope, and I was really, really glad to see it. When I see crap like this, it pisses me off, and I'll tell you why it pisses me off. First of all, we're talking about Scott McLuhan doing the job that we hired him to do. Coming in and concentrating on player evaluation. Now, granted, yes, Scott McLuhan has not hit on all of his draft picks and has not hit on all of his free agency signings. And that's very much a part of being a general manager. They're going to hit and you're going to miss. The people that he's hit on, mind you, is probably hits that we wouldn't have made without him. Now, the misses, I don't even think the misses would have been as successful without him because some of those misses weren't really all that bad. Now, of course, the Kendall Reyes situation was a joke. The Kendall Reyes situation was us just trying to throw somebody in here to see how they were going to do, and it didn't work out and we let him go. The Stephen Pyatt situation, I think the Stephen Pyatt situation, and I was a Stephen Pyatt guy. I loved Stephen Pyatt. He didn't necessarily work out here, and it was sucked to see him go, but I completely understood when we ended up letting him go. But given the toe injury that he had sustained, he was not able to play at the caliber that we expected him to play, and that was unfortunate. If he would have been completely healthy, would he have been more of a dominant force? I think he would have been a much more impactful player for us. Not a completely impactful Pro Bowl caliber type player, but I think he would have been a much more impactful player for us. I think we took a gamble on him, a stretch on him, and it didn't necessarily work out, and sometimes that happens. Now, I'm not so worried about the Scott McLuhan effect in this situation and the fact that our team president has come down on him. So we're sitting here asking, Bruce Allen, you need to do your job. Like I said before in the beginning of this segment, I don't question. I don't have a boss. I don't have a conglomerate coming down on me. I don't have people that I have to appease that are paying my paycheck. So I don't have to scrutinize what it is that I do to anybody. So I can ask this question. The question that I have is not so much the Scott McLuhan factor in this, because Scott McLuhan's been able to do his job to a certain measure of satisfaction as far as Burgundy Fly Guy is concerned. The question that I have is, what's Bruce Allen's job? What the hell is Bruce Allen's job? Who's checking after Bruce Allen? What do you do here? What do you do? What is your job? I don't get it. You want to talk about somebody that's hit and miss at their job? Pal, you're batting zero at this point. You brought in Scott McLuhan, that's it, but that's it. Who else have you brought in here? So far, your reputation in this league is so horrible. You can't even get a decent defensive coordinator in this organization. Everybody, everybody's thumbing their nose at this organization. Everybody's laughing at us. So they're not going to come here and coach. They're not going to come here and coach by any stretch of the imagination. They're not going to come here and coach by damn sight. And if you think about it, this is a team that actually had a certain measure of success the last couple of years. You think that there would be some coaches out there that would be fairly interested in coming here to coach. But that isn't happening. Okay, you're bringing these people in, and it's not like you have a laundry list of individuals that want to coach here, and you just can't necessarily decide. There is no laundry list of coaches. You bring them in for interviews, and they're not interested in coming here. They want a whole lot of other dominoes to fall before they land here. And let's face it, they're going to find something else before they end up coming here. We are the last resort for everybody. And I blame Bruce Allen. Bruce Allen, do your job. Stop sitting here trying to concern yourself with the talent evaluation. Stop trying to concern yourself with who's going to get credit for developing who, or who's doing really, really well and who drafted them, who brought them here. That's not what we pay you to do. That's not what I would pay you to do. If I was the owner of this football team, I'm bringing in both my general manager and my team president. I'm sitting them at the table, and I'm saying in front of both of them, hey, Scott McGloin, if you're not doing any interviews because that's what your team president wants you to do, then I'm going to back that. I don't want you doing any interviews. I want you to concentrate on player evaluation. I think you're doing a fairly decent job. Do I think you could do better? Yes, I think we could all do better. But having said that, that is what I would like you to do. Concentrate on player evaluation because I know you've invested a lot of your picks in 2017, so I need you to hit on as many of those as possible. So I'm watching you too. And then I'm going to excuse Scott McGloin out of the room. And it was give me just me and the president in that room. I'm going to look at Bruce Allen and I'm going to say, what on earth are you doing? What are you doing? Turning the screws on my general manager? I should be turning the screws on you. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing for me? You've got all kinds of defensive coordinators in this league that don't want to talk to us. Your job is to get them in here. Your job is to get them in here and want to talk to us, to want to coach for us. You've got to sell this football team to every other defensive coordinator in this football, in this football conglomerate. You want them coming in here coaching for us, begging to coach for us. You're not doing your job. As far as I'm concerned, between the two of you, I'd rather let go of you because I'm not seeing it. I don't know why I'm paying you. There's a lot of things that our team president needs to be and needs to do, and he's not doing them because he's concerning himself with what the general manager is doing. You guys ever work with that guy? You ever work with that guy that has a specific job description that's supposed to be doing a particular job at your workplace, but he doesn't do it? He's concerned with what it is that you're doing. He's pointing out all the little things that you're not doing right. He's pointing out all the little things that you can't do well, even though he's not exactly doing the stuff that he's supposed to be doing, or she. We all have that guy. We all know that individual. We've all worked with them for years. We're working with them tomorrow. You know exactly who I'm talking about. That, to me, is exactly what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the team president that is doing all kinds of things to bring all this blame on everybody but him. We're not concentrating on the team president here. We're going to take a look at that general manager guy. You're not doing very well because your general manager can't do this, your general manager can't do that, your head coach can't do this, your head coach can't do that. I'm sorry, Bruce Allen, but what are you doing here? What are you doing for me? How are you exactly changing the future of this football franchise with the talent that you should be bringing in here as coaches for this football franchise? Because I'm not seeing it. I haven't seen it at all. I know that you've helped get, Mike Shanahan here. The Mike Shanahan era is over. And I know you got the Jay Gruden in here, but Jay Gruden was not our top pick and was not somebody that we thought we were going to be landing on. Jay Gruden was a stretch, and we got lucky getting Jay Gruden here. Because after that, God only knows what Jim Zorn-type talent we would have brought in here. And oh, by the way, the Jim Zorn situation? Yeah. Okay, moving along from that. The only redeeming quality that I see that Bruce Allen has been able to give us in the last couple of years has been Scott McGloin. And right now, if Scott McGloin does not work in Washington, then I'm getting rid of Bruce Allen too. I'm scrapping the whole damn thing and I'm starting over. And that's not a good sign, man. That's a bad sign. That's the razor's edge that I'm talking about. And a lot of this, the tipping point starts with the Kirk Cousins situation. If this Kirk Cousins situation does not get figured out, then yeah, the dark days of the Washington Redskins will be upon us again, ladies and gentlemen. That storm cloud is on the horizon. We can see it, and it's a bitch. It's going to be tearing up homes. It's going to be uprooting families. It's going to be destroying lives, just like it did in the 2000s. Just like it did a few years ago. We're going to be seeing it all over again. And we can only hope and cross our fingers that something pushes that storm in a different direction. We hope that it goes around us. But we're on very fragile times right now. And we'll know within the next 6 to 8 months exactly how this is going to play out. But this is the stage that is set for us. These are the cards that we're being dealt. Let's see how it is that this football organization is able to use and utilize those cards that we're being dealt. We'll see how it plays out. I don't know about you. But I'm kind of nervous. Screw it, I'm really nervous. We'll see you guys next time.